It's become all too easy these days to just simply blame the UK Civil Aviation Authority for the woes of the drone hobby and industry. It is not by any means an easy job, especially in the current landscape. Set aside that at the moment we're in historically difficult political times and that we currently live in an era where social media often decides the outcome to many debates. You also have to factor in what has been a very difficult period for the UK airspace regulator. We have very quickly in the UK gone from the former regulatory system to preparing full out to adopt fully the EASA regulations side of things. We're not talking about mirroring there. We were talking about the full adoption and continuing on as a member of EASA. And then at what you could only call really the 11th hour, the decision was taken by government that the airspace regulator would follow suit in terms of Brexit and operate independently from Europe and therefore leave EASA. So we then had a rather rushed period where the regulations were mirrored rather than fully adopted as such. We now, of course, enter into a further period of reflection and review with a huge public consultation coming up, which is being worked on right now in the offices of the CAA to review the entire regulatory space of drones once again to suit the UK. So really to see which of the EASA EU rules help us and which don't, and have our own system. In wider terms, we certainly felt the impacts of this with issues such as the C-label drone system, which obviously was a bit of a kick in the teeth in terms of the hobby, but also some lower level commercial operators as well. However, with all of that aside, and you're aware that I am wholly supportive, on the whole rather supportive of the CAA's work here on Geeksvana, something slightly more concerning has reared its head again late last year and has continued with the publication of the newest CAP documents, CAP 722 Hotel and the others continuing on through the confusion of the acceptable means of compliance publication as well. The errors and issues that arose through that period kept us very busy here on Geeksvana, lots of videos and live streams. As much as I give full credit to the CAA in their responses and how quickly they corrected many of those CAP documents, the same cannot be said in terms of for the professional operators operating from essential documents such as CAP 722 Alpha and Hotel. We entered a confusing and frustrating period for many, where new documents and information was promised frequently by the Civil Aviation Authority, but did not actually come. So, despite the fact that I recognise the extremely difficult period the CAA have just operated through, not even mentioning the extra stress and dimensions that operating through a pandemic can cause, going by the facts that I can find, so the documents released by them, the discussions I hold with the CAA, interviews that we've had with them here on the channel, and the countless interactions with professional operators who hold operational authorizations or who are trying to gain those authorizations, it appears that the system at the moment is simply not working effectively. I don't think you can really dispute that. There are many reasons why. Not minor within these, we're told, is funding and the team sizes at the CAA, although the fact, according to a Freedom of Information release, is the RPAS, or drones, brought in nearly 3 times the financial income than that of general aviation did in recent years, and also made a large profit as opposed to a loss on the GA side, and that the profit is made from that income. That information will become important as our show goes on this evening. But yes, so tonight, that is what we're going to look at. And we're going to look at some of the comments that we've had, some of the interview clips that we've had from Mark Wharry, and really discuss our show and some of the issues around that. Now, I have a highly pent up man behind the scenes, especially with the fact that I've been off for 3 weeks, just over, with the human malware, which means it delayed this show even further. But here he is, the man, the legend.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello. I don't even know if my voice works on video now because I've not done this for so long. I've got spiders nesting in there in the back of my throat. And look what's happened to the toilet. Somebody's come in and fitted some lights.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, the shower room, the shower room studio, your audio is dramatically improved, and some RGB lights have appeared. It's crazy that it's almost like you're becoming a bit of a YouTuber there. You've even got a drone in the background and everything.
I'm an Amazon fan.
Graham at Amazon. There we go. It's a nice little extra view of Graham's setup there, just to embarrass him a little bit more. So
Thank you.
So tonight we are talking about the specific category, but do bear in mind that this conversation is based on the fact that there is an excellent safety record for drones in the UK, whether that's hobby or professional user. We as users of drones really do have a fantastic safety record in terms of any kind of really serious issue happening there. It does have a wider impact, although we're talking about the specific category tonight. It does have a wider impact because these are the same people, the same organisation that regulate the hobby use as well. Now, there will be a deeper dive on some of the technical sides of the forms, and also actually, what we would almost term surviving CAP 722H or hotel, depending on how you want to describe it. Later in the week for channel members, I noticed that we did actually have Dan the Drone Man.
Good to see.
Yes, joined up to become a member of the very specific network. Thank you very much for that, Dan. And members of that very same network can join us later in the week for a deeper dive. I'll put a link in the live chat. It's also in the description below for you to be able to become a channel member if you want to be part of that. And that will really be the deeper dive that perhaps other viewers pretty much wouldn't
appreciate.
Yeah. That's probably a way of saying it, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to bring up 722H and just. So now we obviously have the title this evening. Regulatory Roulette is the CAA supporting the UK drone industry, and that title has a bit of a double meaning in terms of the difference in responses that people are getting from the CAA. So that we are getting reports from operators up and down the UK who feel like they are getting different responses on different weeks from different people at the CAA, which doesn't really help them in planning their business. But also, is the CAA supporting the UK drone industry? That second part, because of course, Graham, it is mandated within the CAA's articles of association, their terms as such, that they are there to grow the UK drone industry.
Yeah, and it's a regulatory requirement, and under the regulators code is that when you're a regulator, you try and grow what you're regulating. And certainly, if you look at the number of operational authorization holders, I think the last sets of numbers we've had is that it dropped from 7,000-ish to 3,500-ish. So that's not growth. And this week, I read one particular thread where there were half a dozen people saying, yeah, not bothering with the operational authorization, and they just put that down to the complexity of it, and the people call it alphabet soup, you call it what you will, the complexity of the documents, which doesn't need to be complex. And in fact, I'd argue that most of the people who are referencing documents probably don't need to reference them. In fact, I've had confirmation you do not need to reference any of those documents in your ops manual. It's almost a ludicrous situation we've got ourselves into.
Almost, exactly. People are talking about ads. Just so you know, I keep pressing the button to delay ads another 10 minutes. And we're also on the most conservative settings we can be on. But do give me feedback in the chat when you see ads coming in, because it's feedback we're giving back to YouTube as well via support tickets, because I don't want people bombarded with ads. I mean, why you would want an ad during a live show, I've got no idea. I mean, I feel like we almost need to start having ad breaks, saying, right, it's been half an hour, we'll do an ad break so that YouTube still talks to me. But there we go. So apologies if you're getting that. And yeah, as El Smega says, get premium, no ads. But yes. So we are going to go down a memory lane very, very quickly here, but it's important from the point of view of how we got here, because at the moment we still have a 722H hotel that I think many people still feel is very confusing and still feel that there are blatant errors within. Would you say that that's a fair reflection?
Yeah. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn or knows my blog, the EyeUp.camera blog, you'll find something there called Just a Minute, where I go through the hesitation, repetition, and deviation involved in CAP 722H version 2. It isn't correct. It has some stuff in there which, if you were to read it and use as a mitigation, would, under the CAA's own terms, be considered dangerous. Therefore, it is wrong. And if it's wrong in some areas, we don't know if it's wrong in others. So yeah, it's the usual lack of consistency. And yeah, say when we deep dive, you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed how deep
Indeed.
we scratch.
Yes, but the idea of and so channel members know what's coming as well. That the idea of that as well is to help you understand the document in terms of the practicality and actually how to get, because you feel like you have found a formula of being able to get the approval through. And we're going to be talking about that and how you can access that and all that type of good stuff as well during that show. So it should be good fun. But this was the first time I've sat down with Mark Wharry, actually, well, ever, frankly, but also the first time since the document errors of last year. So it was actually one of the first places that I wanted to start talking to him. And again, this has a direct reference on to 722H and everything else, because these are the very documents that we're talking about. And here's a quick clip from that interview from DroneX, where we talk about this with Mark. In terms of, again, we were speaking about the turn of the year when Callum very kindly came on and made a couple of videos to explain a few things. That was obviously around a time where there was the reissuing of CAP 722 and some other documents and that type of thing. It confused myself, and it confused many of our viewers, as to how CAP documents can be released with those kind of errors in them. So, for instance, we had the sub 500 one where one paragraph would contradict the following paragraph, basically. And it to me, where it starts to break down, because there's always errors, where it starts to break down for myself is that if a YouTuber is able to point out errors in a regulator's official published documents, I start to have a bit of an issue with that from the point of view that surely the system should be more rigid to actually allow that. How does that happen? Is there something in the process?
It's a fair criticism, I think, and I think we really took the hit on that, and we took it all on board. We have a lot of internal documents that we need to keep up to date, that we need to release. A lot of them are particularly complex. If you look at our 722 series of documents, you compare them to something like the EASA Easy Access Rules, so the European equivalent. We're into hundreds and hundreds of pages there and things like that. Now, we don't have specialists who purely sit and write documents. We don't have technical authors and things like that, because we are a public service body at the end of the day, and we have to make sure that we deliver value for money with what we do.
Of course.
So we don't have professional authors. It is guys like the ones in my team, the guys and girls there, who contribute to the development of these CAPs, who are able to provide some of the information or do the direct writing and things like that. Okay. And it is a simple fact of the matter that as it gets larger and larger, and as we get more, errors will creep in. We do our best to keep them to a minimum. We encourage entire groups to proofread. Some people may be more interested in proofreading the content and actually commenting on how things are phrased. And yes, we are always going to miss some things, unfortunately, there. But it still helps us deliver the right value for money, I think, and we still get the message out there. What I'd hope that people will give us the slack on, really, is think about the content of the document there. If the document does not make sense, like you say, when paragraphs contradict each other, that's not acceptable to us, and we made a mistake with that kind of thing, and all we can do is try and correct that. Okay. If we put some spelling mistakes in, we leave some placeholder text or something, these things may happen.
Indeed, that kind of error I look at and I think, the amount of revisions that document's gone through as well, I completely understand that. So there we have an explanation from Mark in terms of how those errors happened. And for those people who are new to the channel, you can go back and watch our videos from December, where we talk about, there were literally errors where from one paragraph would contradict the other. One paragraph would tell you could fly sub 500 gram drones over people, and the next one would say you can't fly sub 500 gram drones over people. So we're not talking about, page 5 said the when it should have said they or something. We are talking about critical errors that actually provide the wrong information in terms of what you can and can't do with a drone in the UK. Now, the explanation that Mark gave, and I'm very grateful for Mark for joining us and providing us the explanations to this and other things at the DroneX trade show, seem to focus around the fact that they don't have necessarily a department or authors, as he put it, employed to check these things. Do you find that an acceptable response?
No, and the reason is that if I think of a regulator, they sort of take in the raw material. Because I work in manufacturing, we take in raw materials, we do stuff to it, we spit it out in a different form. Regulators do other stuff, but one of the key things they do is they take in legislation and turn that into guidance and the sort of documents that we used to. That's their product. That's
Yeah, exactly.
that's Ford sending you a blue car because though you ordered a red one. That's not acceptable. And I have to say, if it's unacceptable to put out documents with errors in, how is it acceptable to wait 8 months to correct a document? And how is it acceptable when that document comes out with errors that essentially, when errors are reported, as far as I can tell, they're ignored?
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where, as I said in that interview, that I didn't expect to be, as a smallish YouTuber, being someone that corrected major errors, what I felt were major errors in CAP documents, guidance documents from the airspace regulator. I have to say, I didn't find the explanation from Mark on that satisfying. It's the explanation, so I appreciate that he gave time to answer it, but I didn't necessarily I didn't necessarily feel that was something which I felt comfortable with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think possibly that these documents, as I say, are a product. We work in manufacturing. When we've made a product, we test it before it goes out. And before when a document's designed, part of what you do is a test specification.
Yes.
How is that document going to be used? And therefore, what process can we put it through to see if it works in that process? CAP 722H is a really excellent one, because really the only reason you've got that document from an outsider's point of view is to say, okay, can I use the information in that to generate an operations manual which is acceptable to the regulator? And I tell you what, the version 1 didn't even bother trying. Version 2,
yes,
we've managed to get right and get a good document.
Yeah.
But that's by correcting the CAA's errors. That they don't seem to think in terms of how the documents will be used in the real world, and that's key to testing them and making them work.
Indeed. I mean, Matt Williams. Hi, Matt. Good to see you, Mr. MPW, in the chat. And he's saying, I think Mark just highlighted one of the biggest issues. Maybe it's time to employ experts and technically orientated authors to produce these documents. I have to say, I mean, I'm a writer by trade, as I often bang on about on this channel. Occasionally I will explain that to people. If I produce a document which is incorrect, then actually there is a lot of trouble. The scene won't get filmed correctly or something, but there would be significant problems. But no one's going to do anything unsafely because I write something incorrectly. However, I still have to check my work properly to a level that is of a professional level that is 110% expected of me. Does that make sense? It's sort of I don't accept if you feel that you need that, as Matt is saying in the chat, that actually therefore you need to actually go and do that. You need to actually go and employ these people if that's what's needed. But I still don't accept that every other professional in every other regulator even has that benefit, if that makes sense. So and it still didn't explain. It just says, oh, we obviously as a team check the documents, etc. But that's clearly not working, because every CAP document that comes out, there are errors in. So surely
and that needs to be a formal process. I don't know if it is, or if it's just, can you take a look at this?
Yeah.
I'm from a background where if a document is produced, then you have a minimum of a 4 eyes process. But we used to do purchasing specs where if we got it wrong, it wasn't the end of the world. Generally speaking, we would pick stuff up along the way. But you can bet your bottom dollar, before they went out the door, we would sit around with QA and with technical and with commercial and go through those documents paragraph by paragraph. And it's a horrible process. Nobody enjoys it, but you have to do it.
Yeah, and PD Tech here is saying something I think we'd all agree with, that what professional body doesn't check their work output. Now, I don't think that that's what Mark is saying here. I don't think that he is saying that they don't check their work output, but that they don't have specific people sat around who are going to do that, because of course, there is a finite budget, etc. And you could argue that they would need the team focused on other things. But equally to give the answer of that, because I don't know what I was expecting. I think perhaps I was expecting something along the lines of, that was a bit of a shock factor to the system. We, as he said, we agree that it's not acceptable and it shouldn't happen. But also, surely there, I expected some kind of, we had a review on that, and this is now how we ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
To me, that's what would happen within any company I've ever worked within.
Yeah.
And I don't work in the regulatory sense, in the regulatory space. I would expect there to be some kind of accountability, some kind of situation of where the system is reviewed, so that we can start getting the documents correct. It didn't, as I say, it didn't feel like a very satisfying answer.
No, and this was over 9 months on from when all of this blew up originally. There should now be systems in place, which mean he can sit there and say that will not happen again, and this is why it won't happen again. You know, this is how we've improved the process. But I don't get the feeling that has happened. And the release of CAP 722H on 4th of August sort of confirms that it is not right yet, and it should be, because guys, you had months to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't feel like, I don't, as I say, it wasn't a very satisfying answer. I feel strongly that and I understood in the larger scheme of things what Mark was trying to say, that actually, therefore his smaller team, his team of people are the ones that need to check it. But you are the regulator. The very output that you publish is the regulation and is the guidance and the regulation documents that we all fly our drones under, whether we're hobby or on the professional side of things. These are the very documents. This is the proof of the pudding. This is the end result. If this is,
which may be used in a court of law.
Yeah, and of course, when we talk about things like 722 and the CAP documents, although the hobby do have that sort of, we can get round AMC or we can get round 722 by fighting it on legislation in court and saying, actually, I don't adhere to the AMC guidance on visual line of sight, I go to legislation. Of course, professional operators with operational authorizations don't necessarily have that. They don't have that benefit.
Although, to be honest, from the set of documentation we've got, it's hard to tell, Sean. It's hard to tell whether they've got that or not. It really is. It is absolutely packed with contradictions at the moment, and things that you thought were in place have sort of been shuffled away to one side. So stuff that was in place in version 1, you thought, actually, that's it. That's very clear. Version 2. Where's it gone?
And that's hotel you're talking about, obviously there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the next clip I want to play is the AMC clip, which is again, this is another explanation that I've been trying to get since the start of the year when AMC etc. became prevalent, and really asking Mark, actually, what is AMC?
Just one final thing, actually, on caps and that type of thing. The AMC, the acceptability compliance and guidance material, where does that sit in terms of law and legislation? Is it policy? Is it advice? Is it partly legislation? I mean, where does that actually sit?
AMC is, in concept, relatively clear to us, because since the UAS implementing regulation came into force, we now regulate through the basic regulation for aviation. So the implementing and delegated regulations fall underneath that effectively. And the basic regulation instructs us as a national aviation authority to produce means of compliance to the appropriate implementing regulations there. So in having an implementing regulation for UAS flying, we are required to give you acceptable means of compliance. So it's not the only way to comply. The fact that this is our acceptable way of complying is one thing, but there's always the opportunity to submit what we call an alt-mock, an alternative means of compliance. There are, in the airline world, for example, some major airlines that have their own alt-mock agreements with us because they happen to do things a different way, but they are still able to meet the requirement of the raw legislation. Now, CAP 722A, for example, which is the key template really on how to provide a safety case to us, is not formal AMC. So that is more of a guidance document in that sort of sense there. But in due course, I expect that we will tidy that up, we'll improve it, and we will have formal AMC, which means this is the way we expect you to submit. Now, if you were the sort of operator that had a very unique, very bespoke operation, and you just couldn't fit it into this document set or this style, then there's always the OPMOC opportunity there, because what we don't want is people having to adapt our document to fit them. We want something that is going to work for the end user, because that makes it more likely to be safe. What I don't want to do is go and audit an organization and find that their safety case is used as a paperweight.
Okay, so do you feel that you know now
Yeah.
what AMC? I mean,
crystal clear. OPMOC. Yeah. We'll do it. I'm going to go and have an OPMOC
and
after this.
I don't want it to feel like we're getting it, Mark, because at least Mark is the guy that's come on camera, and he's
Absolutely.
you know, he has looked to try and provide some of the answers. However, it's interesting that actually even the acceptable means of compliance that he talks about still isn't in the form that they want it to be. So it's going to be in a more formal format, and actually then there's going to be less. It sounds like in the future they're going to give us less somehow, obviously through legislation.
Well,
they're going to give us less opportunity to decide whether or not we're actually able to follow it or not.
How we get, yeah. Well, to me, so you got the basic, the implementing regulation. So you went through the regulations, and then there is a requirement to come up with an acceptable means of compliance. Now, the way we used to comply in an acceptable way was to read CAP 722. So is there a requirement to produce a completely separate document to CAP 722? Or, hey, couldn't you have said CAP 722 is our acceptable means of compliance?
Yeah, and we did get that with the Callum interviews in December as well, where it was discussed of the, you know, oh, 7, and it was talked generally in comms from the CAA back at that period that the 722 wasn't necessarily the document that's you know, that's not necessarily the important document. The AMC is here, and then very, very quickly it sort of reversed again, and actually 722 seems to be the focus, and AMC is just guidance and something we're working on. So again, we obviously end up in the middle, the operators in the middle, whether you're hobby or professional, kind of sat there thinking, you know, what are we doing here? You know, where does this actually lead?
I know some OSC operators who, if they are watching tonight, will be spitting feathers over the statement that you don't have to follow CAP 722A if it doesn't suit your operation. Well, because what they're being told that there isn't an OPMOC for that.
If you put an OPMOC in, if you have an alternative means of compliance agreed, then that's possible. The only thing that frustrates me as well about that is when they talk about alternative means of compliance, they don't think about the financial side of things there. So they don't think, okay, you could put an alternative means of compliance, but of course that means an OSC. That means, you know, and also even higher than that. As he said, airlines do have alternative means of compliance in place. That's a lot of money. That's not just writing a letter to the CAA and saying, hi, this is how even as a recreational pilot or whatever, this is how I'm going to comply. Do you find that acceptable? Of course, there has to be checks and processes. Of course, it has to be via application, but it is an expensive thing. It's something which I think is, I don't know, it's a difficult thing. But again, I don't feel like I was satisfied by the answer. Perhaps that's why we need this review. Perhaps that's why we need this review of everything, and that's why we need to be able to see a change in drone regulations coming through. But again, I will get on my soapbox for just one moment. This is even off script from this. It is why when the consultation comes out, even if you are answering that consultation, as many people did with the CFI, saying, I'm not happy with this, even just the actual makeup of this, it's so important to get involved and answer it when it does happen. I think it's such an important thing. So we have that sort of situation that we're still within, really, because we didn't really, I mean, you know, we haven't even got into the roulette of bubble, and you know, depending on which month you applied, what kind of response you got in terms of separation from uninvolved people with the PDA01 operational authorization. We haven't even got into that kind of side of things, which will be more for the deep dive. But it feels like, again, I don't know all these months later, and it's actually interesting sitting down with Mark months later after these issues happened, actually, because you also feel like there might have been changes, there might have been updates to give, but actually it pretty much was the same situation as then. Hopefully, as I say, the optimist in me thinks maybe that they'll actually get this sorted through the regulatory review and have a system that they can deal with. But you know, who knows?
I mean, I got the feeling on the 7th of December last year when everything was announced was that this was a really well thought through bunch of documents that they'd been working on for some time. I mean, they'd actually had 2 years of this. But 9 months on, I think that explanation wouldn't have made it any clearer for anybody than they were on the 8th of December.
Yeah, I mean, it frustrates me. Okay, I know I've gone away from my microphone and I'm spoiling my audio section here, but this frustrates me because I am a reasonable journalist. Okay, I am a reasonable person, and one of the reasons I managed to get interviews with FAA, CAA, police, everybody else like that is because I will present things fairly, and you know, I'm not setting people up, if that makes sense. I'm not a shock jock. I'm not trying to say Mark just said this, now let's all, you know, pile on. No. That isn't my style. But my problem is that when we then have situations where we don't get where we get issues, then, you know, it just feels very unsatisfying, and there's only so far you can go with unsatisfying responses when I see the issues that people have in the recreational side of things, and in particular with this show, that the professional operators are having. And, you know, I see that feedback. I get many emails every single week from people outright complaining that they are either PDRA01 operational authorization holders or applying for one, or have been for many years, and they are getting what they feel is completely messed around in an inconsistent way as well. It's not as if, oh, this has changed, here's a document to tell you this has changed, and please amend. These are things just getting thrown up out of left, right, and centre of different interpretations of different things. Sometimes I am seeing from the evidence I'm seeing, you'll get a different interpretation from depending on who is dealing with the application. And that to me, just I don't know why, but I would again, perhaps I'm asking too much, but I would again expect a regulator to have a standard operating procedure for everything, and for everything, every answer to almost be, well, regulated.
Yeah, you would have thought, wouldn't you? I mean, that's what a regulator, physical regulator, does, doesn't it? It keeps things nice and steady. I've got one this week. I had an email, and which I'm not going to go into because, as you say, we do need to sort of look at it in detail.
Yes.
But it directly contradicts an email that was sent 2-3 days, well, just before the weekend. It coming from the same team about something as basic as a document. It's I'm fairly speechless.
Yeah, and again, you know, this is all directed towards getting the right system in place.
Absolutely.
This is not about being on a soapbox and saying all regulation is bad. A lot of the regulation that actually occurs in the UK, I have no real issue with in terms of drones. I support PDRA01 and the operational authorization it provides, especially if it still includes the bubble, etc., and that type of thing. And I support that needs to be evolved and developed over time to suit different risks, etc. But we are talking about a situation here where somebody with 4 or 5 years of gaining an operational authorization every single year, with many more years than that of successfully flying heavy lift commercial drones, can apply today and will be completely baffled by the process and by the responses they get, and that to me just doesn't seem to marry up.
Look at the simple. If you want things to be safe, keep them simple. When I wrote my Update Your Ops Manual blog, I remember sitting there. I was on holiday. I only had my laptop, and I didn't have the 3 screens that I normally have in front of me. I needed 3 screens in front of me, and on those 3 screens I can have more than 3 documents. I needed 4 or 5 documents open just to check a few parts of an ops manual, because everything was cross-referencing to another document. It's almost like they've tried to make it more complex than it needs to be. If you are pressed for resource, then you have to look at your product line and say, okay, we need to cut this out. Cut out CAP 722 or cut out the AMC, and bring them together into one product. But don't try and do everything and then mess everything up.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps that's what we're going to see, because Mark was talking about an AMC that has more weight under law, and perhaps that will be a combined 722 AMC. Because I can't see why you would need whatever regulatory, whatever core legislation this is then based under, whether it's the air navigation order or whether they're going to amend the IR, or how they're going to work this new review into legislation. I can't see there needing to be 4 or 5 levels of hierarchy of regulation for drone operations which are safe, which have proven to be safe. Look at Article 16. I think even Article 16 on the recreational side of things, many people sort of hid behind the sofa waiting for all sorts of problems to come up with people flying under Article 16. I'm not aware of one headline. I'm not aware of one negative issue, partly down to the extreme professionalism of people like Simon Dale at FPV UK, who have put out simple to follow and accurate guidance on how to comply with Article 16. So, funnily enough, a simple and well written handbook has resulted in many flights under an operational authorization, because of course that's what it is, to happen successfully and without issue. So hats off to FPV UK.
And meanwhile the tech is getting safer all the time.
Exactly. Well, yes, arguably yes, indeed. It depends which side of drones I think that you go on there, but yes, indeed. I will agree that in general, yes. So next up, we're talking about communication, and here again, this is one of the biggest issues that I have in terms of what is presented to me by my viewers, and it's particularly viewers of our very specific network, which there is actually there's a link in the description, and there's also a link in going into the live chat right now. He says by magic, but he actually pauses whilst doing it. It should be far slicker, shouldn't it?
Slick.
So where we can join the very specific network and gain access to all sorts of videos and live streams, which are coming up very, very soon, including the one towards the end of the week, which is on 722H. But I get a lot of communication back from those members and from all sorts of people regarding communication. I mean, the hobby side as well, but we're focusing on the commercial side this evening, the professional side this evening, where people say, I just want to be able to get clear communication. I want to have clear comms directly with the CAA as, one of 3,000 odd operators who hold operational authorization to find out what's actually going on. I get emails from people saying, I'm sick of hearing things first on Geeksvana. I'm sick of hearing things first here. Why don't I hear about this from the CAA? So therefore, communication was one of the important subtopics that I raised with Mark at DroneX. And here is that next clip. We get a lot of feedback and a lot of discussion online at the moment regarding communication.
Yes.
And I know it's something from the RPAS AGM speech that you and Kevin and Callum gave, where it's something that you guys are actively working on at the moment. But there is still a lot of frustration out there where people feel like they are not getting the right level of communication from the CAA to the specific operator level. So an operator that is either renewing or is trying to find information out struggles to get that information. And they also feel like things suddenly appear on Geeksvana or suddenly appear somewhere online and hang on, why don't I know about that, etc.
Yeah.
I realise it's a difficult thing to do, a national regulator to communicate with a group of 3,000 people. But do you have any sympathy for that issue at the moment and just how frustrated people feel?
Yes, and I wish I could say it more clearly, but it's frustrating to us us as well. We're in a unique situation that if I look at colleagues in different areas of the CAA, they may only have 50 or 100 regulated entities where they have very close relationships and long-term relationships as well, and it's very easy for them to disseminate information.
Of course.
We not only have 3,500 or so in the specific category, we also have our tentative entries into more complex flying, we've got our REEs as well, and of course we've got hundreds of thousands of registered operators who are
Yes.
operating in the open category
Indeed.
as well.
Yes.
Now, we have no one-size-fits-all solution to any part of that. We're trying to make sure that we know who are the people that we need to communicate certain things to, and making sure we empower them in the right direction. So our REEs, we're restarting a bit of a better communication profile with them
Okay.
to make sure they're more closely involved with us, because they are delivering training and effectively assessing pilot competence on our behalf. They're part of our team in that
Yes,
sense there.
yes.
I do want to see us work better with RPAS UK. I think the industry body in that sense is very valuable to us, and if people are driven to the industry body and know that they will get some information in that direction, that's beneficial to us as well.
Okay.
So that we've got access to people in that sort of method there.
Okay, yeah, I think my only personal point, having a unique perspective somewhat from the point of view that I speak with all of those bodies and, of course, the end operators as well, is that actually I feel like there is a frustration and a desire for there to be even more completely direct communication. So the CAA to operator to not need to go via, because again, passing information to RAEs, you've then got to rely on the RAEs passing the information on themselves as well, and even with RPAS and others, and even coming to Geeksvana, you have to rely on people watching the Geeksvana video, etc.
Yes,
Whereas, of course, you have these people's details, you have the ability to communicate directly, and I think I suppose that's probably on behalf of the people that are watching that have asked that question, that's probably the message I would leave from the point of view that they would love to see more direct communication with themselves, and a way of that happening in a more efficient manner, basically.
We can take that on board, absolutely. We have the Skywise system, so we do have a method there whereby people can sign up for UAS-specific information that we're able to release, and if we have a particular safety directive or something relating to an individual model type or thereabouts, that might be the option that we take for that. In terms of directly communicating with operators, there's undoubtedly ways we could look at doing that, and if that's what the community wants us to do, it's something we can start analysing. Whether we eventually come around to a newsletter style concept or direct email sends or something along those lines, I'm sure there's options we can pick up when we've got information to send out.
Indeed, I know. I mean, I'm a big fan of Skywise, and a lot of the time people will respond to my videos and they'll say, if it wasn't for Geeksvana, I wouldn't know about this, and I say I found out from Skywise. And then I then turned around, wrote a script, made a video, and put it on my channel. So actually, you would know just as quickly as I do if you were on Skywise. And again, it's something that I appeal to the audience again. Go along to Skywise, register. You will find the information out very, very quickly as and when changes happen. And it's all sorts of things. You can sign up for all sorts of different things. As I've banged on to the audience an awful lot about that in the past. But again, with in terms of the registered users, so the DMARES, operator ID holders, flyer ID holders, again, there seems to be a desire there for more direct conversation, etc., and that type of thing. And one of the ideas that we had on that was actually whether or not you have a Skywise tick box to sign up to Skywise as you renew your DMARES.
Good idea, absolutely, because of course, when people register through DMARES, we're bound by GDPR legislation and things like that.
Yes.
We've got to be very careful that we don't bombard people who don't want our contact with information that would be incorrect use of their emails, etc. So something like that would probably work well. I might like to see us in the RPAS unit using the CA's website more, and using the news feed that we've got there and things like that. Perhaps we need to engage more with people through our other social media feeds and things along these lines. We've experimented with the CA's internal podcast and things like that.
Yes.
So, we will try everything.
Yes.
Try and get messages out there until we find things that land correct.
Yeah, I mean, really the two things that I would recommend is to follow the Twitter account or the X.com account, whatever we call it these days, and sign up to Skywise. And actually, between those two things, you're going to get quite a lot of comms. From the comms team as it comes out, and as you say, you'll also get notifications of the podcasts and that type of thing as well, which I think is really important.
Okay, I'm off.
Okay, so there is the communication side of things, and obviously the two sides of communication kind of crept in there: the open category communication and the specific category communication. To me, it seems more valuable to have direct communication with the very people that you are regulating. I understand the appeal of using RPAS UK and using other outlets of that type in terms of reaching people. But of course, that's still a membership. That's still a membership that someone has to go and pay for. That's still something that people have to count on. That those organisations actually deeming that information necessary to pass out. And equally with RAEs, that there have been lots of RAEs coming and going. There are RAEs who are much more prevalent in terms of and much more active in terms of giving out information to people who they've trained and emailing people with updates and that kind of thing. But again, are we sure people are getting those things? Are we sure those contact details are up to date? People's email addresses may have changed from RAEs and that type of thing from the years that since they were trained. So to me, it seems like they're doing everything apart from communicating directly with operators. Am I wrong in that thought process? And again, this is not. I'm not trying to tear this apart, but I am just trying to see communication is something I've spoken to them about many times, and it's come up in many different ways. And from the open category side of things, I don't know why there isn't a little tick box to say, would you like to receive Skywise updates when you register here? And it's a little tick box, so you know GDPR that you're going to be getting other updates, etc. And people can tick and say yes, and then they'll get all of those drone emails. But equally, of course, in terms of the side of things of the operators, they have operational authorizations with you. They have a contract with you. They want to hear from you. They are actively happy to hear from you, and are people who are acting under an authorization that you've given them. So surely you would want to communicate with them directly. It confuses me.
It confuses me. The tick box thing, I know you were talking about at the end of last year. We are nearly at the end of this year.
Yes.
And it seems as though
I've just seen Matt Williams explode in the chat. And I know somewhere in Canada right now there are soft stress balls being thrown at walls, where he's quite rightly saying, I can't find his message from it here.
Isn't it?
As he says here, why does it sound like this is new information to them? Where we've been asking for direct emails as end users for years. They have the data; it's not difficult, and that is again part of the frustration. There is that, and this is something that many operators have told me they have asked the CAA for. So this is something which has been suggested to them publicly and privately many times.
Yeah.
The only thing I can imagine is that, okay, it's one email going out. So, you want to email the 3,000 operators that there's been a change, or you want to give them a little bit more rounded guidance on something, or an interpretation is changing, or that type of thing. You can send that out to them. Obviously, you then have potentially 3,000 replies could come back with questions. And I understand that could cost, from an admin point of view, could be colossal, could be absolutely colossal.
But is that a cost that RPAS are willing to take on, or the RAEs should take on? As Mark said, the RAEs have a duty to train.
Yeah,
and look
those
after
questions are still going to be there. Those questions are still going to be there. But of course, if those questions aren't coming into you, perhaps you don't have to deal with them. So, as I say, from an admin cost point of view, I can understand it. But again, from the point of view that you are actually the regulator, so you are the person regulating me, I expect you to write to me. If the DVLA, and I know they're not a regulator as such, but if the DVLA want me to know something about something changing in terms of my driving license, or they want to give me some advice, they'll write to me. They have my contact details. They will contact me. And other organizations of that type. They won't, and they will also then back it up with excellent work with people like RPAS UK, and with all sorts of comms with their podcasts, interviews on Geeksvana, videos on Geeksvana, etc., telling people there's lots of awesome ways to back up what that central message is. But for me, the only way it can work in terms of and running a system smoothly is direct communication, because also the other benefit of direct communication is I feel like they would have less holds on operational authorizations, because people would already have the direct information and they would already have a way of dealing with things directly. Surely there is a way of getting that right that strikes the balance. But I just don't see communication via third parties as being a primary way of dealing with communication. I mean, you are an operational authorization holder and someone obviously that deals with authorization holders all day. What are your thoughts on it? I'm going to shut up for a minute.
I mean, it's good to have a nice clean example, and one came up a couple of weeks ago where there is a safety statement that's made on all operations manuals to say you will follow this, this, and this, and essentially the CAA wanted everybody to say you'll follow this, this, and this, and this as well, which was, I think, getting the AMC in there. Now, everybody with an operations manual can go in and change that themselves, provided they know they need to change it. The problem is if the CAA doesn't tell them they need to change it, they will go for their renewal. And if they don't read Facebook and see posts from idiots like me, then they will go in, put in their renewal, and then their document will go on hold because they haven't put on that this, and that. That is a cost to the CAA because they're going to have to stop that document and then wait for it to come back in corrected and then review it again. So they've got a real cost from that lack of communication. So there are some things which are very simple and which shouldn't lead to a lot of questions. And the answer to those questions can almost be automated, which is, if you say, why do I need to do this? Because we tell you, go and do it. Yeah, whatever the answer, perhaps with a little bit of fluff around it.
Yeah.
But essentially, we can't find these things out by waiting to hear a rumor about somebody having had a rejected manual and the reason for rejection, and then somebody else picking up on why, or waiting for a kindly RAE to report it. That's not how this should work.
Because of course there is no obligation.
Really
there is no obligation for any of those third parties to pass that information on, or a standard they have to meet when passing that information on.
No.
I could misinterpret someone's words from interviews. Mark could come back to me and say, "Hi, I don't think that's actually really what I said in that interview, and you focused on the wrong thing there, Sean." That's perfectly acceptable to me. So therefore, surely the comms should be something which actually happen directly, because then you have complete control of them as well. I've highlighted this message here from Matthew Carpenter. It feels like a secret society to me. I know it's not. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And this is part of my issue that I have at the moment with being a journalist in the drone space, is that I feel like I'm a reasonable person. I feel like I can accept what the regulator tells me. And I feel like, I'm very grateful when people like Mark take their time out to come on the channel and discuss things with us. But what I'm also a little bit frustrated about, what starts to annoy me, is that I then sort of, think about the screaming conspiracy theorists there are, and I know, Matthew, you said you're not, within the space. And you start to feel like, well, when you start to get things like, okay, the answer that we've had to the cap errors, the answer that we've had to communication, that actually it is confirmed according to that interview, unless I have a correction sent to me, that there is no system in place of contacting OA holders directly en masse. That to me does not seem like a sensible way of running things. That is just, and I don't feel like I'm unreasonable. I don't feel like I'm picking on Mark or the CAA when I say that, if that makes sense. Is that not a reasonable thing to say?
No, of course it is. It is a reasonable expectation that people who are expected to follow a set of rules and guidance are updated directly by the people who are in control of that guidance. I don't know how much clearer that can be. I mean, there was talk of Skywise. We know that there have been changes to documents that just haven't gone out via Skywise. They should have done. They're important changes. They haven't. They've chosen, for whatever reason, not to use the Skywise system they've got. So even when they have a system and an appropriate system, it's not being used.
Now, this is again. I'm going off script. Sorry, Graham. I'm going off script a little bit on
That's all right.
on our evening of as in going off run order. But
off-piste away.
I like to do this when I see things in the chat. And Simon Stickland, hi Simon, good to see you. Now Simon is, I won't embarrass him, but he is a professional drone pilot. He is a professional drone operator, and has an awful lot of experience. He's very, very good at what he does, has an excellent client base, and is probably one of the most serious drone operators who flies regularly that I know of in the UK that talks to us regularly, if that makes sense. You know, Simon is a serious dude within the drone space. And I see lots of conversations happening with people like myself, with all sorts of organizations, with all these third parties, etc. And then you see this from Simon saying he's had a few recent interactions helping the CAA after their call for help. I asked for a follow-up to each to be told it's not possible. And that to me, okay, I don't know the details of that precise interaction, but you have all of that experience, you have all of that knowledge base of actually using an operational authorization and OSCs
day by
day in,
yes.
day out. The guy posted a picture the other day showing the fact that he now needs to put his fingerless gloves on again because the cold, you know, he really does fly drones, you know, regularly
in horrible conditions from what I can
absolutely tell. Month in, month out. But yet we're not utilizing that knowledge base by the sounds of it. And to me, it just sounds a little bit disingenuous when you then have a call for input from the point of view that you don't already have that deep understanding and that deep knowledge with them. It's crazy.
I don't know why they don't make use of the knowledge base that's out there. And we know a lot of these people, and it's almost like daggers drawn in some cases. And I know there are operators, I definitely know there are operators who are scared to put their head above the parapet. They are absolutely terrified to draw attention to themselves, and that should no way be the case in a regulatory environment.
There is a side to this I understand, okay, because you know you look at the interviews on Geeksvana where Callum came on in December. And bear in mind, you know, this was a situation where there were lots of outstanding questions and people at the CAA rallied round. Callum was actually coming on to talk about BV loss. This actually isn't, I understand, isn't necessarily his direct game, as it were. But actually, himself and Jonathan Nicholson at the CAA decided that actually they could probably get the answers to the other things I wanted to know, and that the people, Mark, etc., weren't available for interview, being December or for whatever other reasons. So he came on and actually had these answers ready to give and gave those answers. And there was a lot of attacking. There was a lot of attacking on how he looks. There's a lot of attacking on just generally going for him. And I understand that. He is the man in those videos. But that does mean that I also understand why the CAA don't have their own YouTube channel with, you know, live Q&As on and that type of thing, or open social media Q&As and that sort of thing. But that's not what we're asking for here. What we're saying is possibly necessary is just a really robust and funded and worked out way of actually engaging with the operational authorization holders and even to an extent the hobby side of things as well, but certainly the OAs, so that you can understand what's actually happening on the ground and so that you can get your messages across and understood, because that's obviously a very, very important part of it as well.
Do you know what? I think if there was a move to do that, to open themselves up to what may be seen as criticism, and to take that on the chin, I think it might be absolutely awful for a couple of months, absolutely dreadful, and the people doing it won't enjoy it. But if they do it with the backing of their employers, and they do it from the point of view of trying to get to the bottom of what the problems are and resolving those problems and coming up with plans and timescales and progress, then I think that would be welcomed.
Yes.
And do you know what? Within 3 months, it would start to be quite a pleasant thing to do.
Yeah, no, indeed, exactly.
It's a great gig, you know,
100%.
because you would be that contact with the regulated community.
And you know, there is the desire to communicate. Mark is a very good communicator himself personally. He's very good at getting messages across to people and delivering that in an understandable way. Callum, others, etc. You know, these people don't have to come on this channel. There is no secret. You know, we are not, as some people think, we're not a secretly government funded channel that is sprung up on behalf of the police or the CIA or yes, crikey. Well, yeah. Well, I'm not sure I'd like to live that way, but yes. But you know, they don't have to come on, and they come on because they want to have those conversations, and they're aware that I've made videos saying, "Are the drone rules broken?" and I've called them out for different things, but they still come on air. They still want to have the conversations, and you know, if anything, I feel like Geeksvana has made it easier for the regulator to come onto social media because people have seen interviews from them before on here. So they you know, the comments are much more focused now on the topic rather than just attacking the individuals and that type of thing. So you know, I feel like we've done some good work on that side of things. But you know, it wouldn't take much. It doesn't have to be public either. This can be closed communication. You can have focus groups built up of these people. You could have maybe, you know, a rolling focus group every quarter of 50 operational authorization holders. Imagine if you change that every quarter. Imagine the kind of feedback and the kind of knowledge you would gain as a regulator over your regulated community. I would say more than speaking to someone like myself or RPAS or any other organization out there, just personally speaking.
Or record interviews, you know, pre-prepared questions. It doesn't have to be live, doesn't have to have that additional bit of pressure.
You're just giving away one of my show formats that I'm working on, and you know it. You're trying to look like you're foreshadowing. Oh look, I came up with that idea.
How did that happen?
Yeah, oh look at that. It's almost as if I said it. Now, one of the things which has come up in the chat a few times, actually one other thing on the chat, Dan the Drone Man, I can see all of your comments as far as the ones I think are coming through. The only thing I would say is if you put a link in a comment, then YouTube blocks it completely. Also, if you put certain words in comments, YouTube blocks it completely. I otherwise get a little link list here of comments, and sometimes there are some to be held and that type of thing. I'm very proud to say with 100 people watching that actually regularly, consistently through the evening, I haven't had to approve one single message. So that's another thing I would like to say as well, from the point of view of anybody at CAA that's worried about coming out and talking to people publicly, then actually, you know, this is actually a community of people that want to have that debate, and haven't had to change one single comment actually, which is good. So
no naughtiness.
Oh yes, Dan the Drone Man said it's because he's hitting the 200 character limit. Yes, indeed. It's it just doesn't come up if we go over it, does it? It just, you hit enter and all that hard work has gone into the ether, which used to frustrate me as well, actually. But yes, which is a shame. So but something else that's come up in the chat, I digress then slightly, is actually operational authorization numbers and the fact that we've gone from 10K down to 3K. This is something that I put to Mark as well, because again, it is one of the top 5 things that operational authorization holders, our members as well, will actually talk to us about. So it's something that I wanted to put forward. And here's a quick clip of Mark talking about why and giving any kind of explanation that he had.
One of the things which has caused some confusion, which would be good to get your opinion on, is the drop in numbers of OA holders from sort of PIFCO to now. So we're going from around the 10,000 mark to around the 3,000 mark at the moment.
That's right.
Why do you think that's happened? Is that necessarily a negative thing? And does it concern you, basically?
It doesn't really concern me at this stage, because we're also seeing a slow but steady rise in more complex applications, and we're seeing a diversification of the industry as a whole. I think that back in the early days, sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was a lot of smaller entities springing up, one man and his phantom, as it used to be, who wanted to get into some commercial operations. The interesting statistic to look at there, and I don't have the exact numbers for you, is the number of PFCOs or PFAWs that were never renewed. So the number that applied, gave it a shot, and then it came to nothing. So what we do see is a higher renewal rate right now. So we know that perhaps the 3,500 core PDRA1 operators we have now are perhaps the same, that we're always renewing and always the main section of that churn in our specific category there.
Okay.
So I think the biggest difference, of course, that people will point to us about is that you can now operate commercial in the open category. The change in the regulatory set removes that trigger.
There has to be a certain number of people who had an OA that actually, even with the A2CFC, even with the sub 250, etc., they're now thinking, okay, actually, I don't really need that. So there's always going to be a percentage that just didn't renew for those reasons.
It's a combination of no longer needing our permission to work commercially. Now, you effectively did get our permission to operate in a congested area with a PFCO as well, but with the rise in sub 250 grams, that's less of an issue than it used to be.
Yes.
Okay, so that was Mark's thoughts on the fact that in my time as a journalist in the last 3-4 years, we have seen a drop in operational authorization holders from 10,000 to 3,000, and there's even been comedy moments where we've seen CAA slides and we've seen presentations being given where the higher number was still given when the lower number was correct, and that we've had all sorts of fun and games, haven't we, with this particular side of things. Over the last year in particular. Now, you have to factor that, yes, the open category, and I mean, I've seen people in the live chat tonight saying they no longer have an operational authorization, they fly in the open category. I think that's got to be a chunk of people, hasn't it? That we have to concede that there is a chunk of people who have done that. And equally, on social media, for whatever the reason is, we are seeing PIFCOs saying they're not going to convert to GVC, and they're not going to, because mainly, or some are saying because of the cost of the retraining and that type of thing as well. But there's other reasons they're not going to. So yes, again, there is a chunk of people who just fell off the system from the PIFCO side of things. But I'm not sure you can account for that between the 10,000 and 3,000, in my opinion. I mean, what's your view?
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Two-thirds disappeared. I don't. There's always been churn. There is churn now. I know, because I'm in various groups with various RAEs, and you see people are doing their GVC all the time. So they're going out, they're getting operational authorizations. There are new people coming in. So there is still churn, but it's all churning at a much lower level. You know, if it was 10% a year churn, and it was probably higher, then that's 300 a year churning now. Whereas it might have been 1,000 churning. That churn's still there. What concerns me is some of the old hands, if you like, and not necessarily old enough to retire, just people who have got other things to do. Not everybody flies it. Like Simon Stickland seems to fly drones non-stop. I think
he's probably flying one right now. Yeah,
he will be. He will be. He gets it to type for him. Yeah. But there are an awful lot of people for whom it's a tool. If they're a videographer, they've got a drone as well, and they might have a larger drone because they need that quality of work. You know, they've got to use a Mavic 3, so they're an OA holder. So those people, I think, are just saying, well, it's just not worth it, because it's a part. When it was part of your job before, it was easy enough to do.
Yes.
Now, as you say, if you've got to retrain again, and there's different ways of
so there's
retraining.
always going to be that kind of natural turnover, and I think there are lots of reasons why lots of people didn't. But I don't think the open category one has too much legs. Although I do speak to a lot of people who say they now fly in the open category. That, you know, the Mini 4 Pro is an amazing drone, but there's only so much you can do with a sub 250 gram drone, because of course once you get above that, you've then got the A2 COC 50 meter limit, which is horizontal, which isn't a bubble, which then becomes almost impossible to be able to do things like roof surveys and, you know, other bits, unless people are doing it under A2 COC and just ignoring that side of things and hoping they don't get caught. Who knows? But you know, that to me starts to, okay, then the numbers that you can appropriate to that differs. And I suppose when I analyze the figures, the issue I have as well is that the figures were growing consistently.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Year on year they were growing, and you know that can only be a good thing. And a good measure of a healthy and thriving industry is growing numbers of participants and people who are investing money, investing time into running businesses in that niche. And if you have a steady progressive increase in numbers all the way up to 10, just over 10,000 or even nearly 11,000, I think it was, to then jump off a cliff with those figures down to 3,000 very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yes, we went through a huge regulatory change, and as people in the chat are saying, there is the thing of people actually, changing because of the open category. But surely 10,000 to 3,000 is some kind of warning sign.
You would have thought it should be a concern. I mean, yes, there are people doing more complex things with drones or trying to, and there are one or two companies that employ quite a few people, but not enough to make up that sort of number. It is still a mum and pop business, isn't it? And largely, people come in, they buy a drone, they think they've got a business. It doesn't mean their business will thrive necessarily, and they may become part of that churn. But I see people in the groups who come in and they're fresh names. And you know what? Sometimes they're there next year and they're there 2 years later, and those people are still there. They're still coming through, but much lower number.
Yeah, I mean, and as I say, we're not here to bash the CAA, and I think that you cannot ever level that at me, Sean Hickey, Geeksvana, at all. I am constantly holding the reins back on Graham in terms of how he would really like to unleash himself. But of course,
not at all. I am.
But
I'm so nice.
but we always want to get the information out there, which is why sometimes people can see me giving an easy time to the police or regulators, etc., because I want to get that information out to them and across to people. But in this instance, having gained these answers, I'm still left frustrated, and I'm still left feeling like I can spot very simple solutions, mainly ones which are just time and effort, i.e. developing a direct communication flow genuinely, so that an operational authorization holder can get that. There is, funding is only is finite, but we are talking about, and ironically, even though operators have dropped so much, the funding, because of things like Demares and everything else like that, the RPAS money coming into the CAA has actually grown, and the profit they're making from it has grown. It's nearly treble the income from RPAS that there is now from general aviation, which is crazy. Therefore, there must be, in my opinion, I mean, they may one day show me some funding and say, look, you find the money. So I understand that side of things, but to me, this kind of thing, having the proper checking of documents, communicating directly with the regulated community, the people that you're asking to follow these rules, and supporting and listening to the business operators within that field to ensure that you're supporting them and their industry to grow, seem to be some fairly simple messages, but they're not messages that I'm bringing fresh. They're not messages that have suddenly come up.
And it should be easy to make an argument about greater efficiency flowing from this. If you communicate, then you won't get so many incorrect operations manuals, and you won't have to put them on hold in shared services and look at them twice and check things twice. Let's not do that. Let's just tell people what needs to be in the operations manual this year. That there has been nothing that I'm aware of, no specific release. And there used to be, I think it was CAP 2013 that came out when there was a reasonable change in the regulations a few years ago. And that explained line by line what people needed to do and take into account in their ops manual. That seems to have stopped, and that's the reason I do my own in EyeUp, because it sort of helps people out. But I'm not the regulator. No, I don't know if I'm giving the right answer.
Exactly.
And I couldn't get the right answers myself. So
indeed. So if you want a deeper dive on this topic, and if you want to go more in depth into H itself and also how to survive H, we have that stream coming up for members later in the week. So become a very specific network member, like Dan the Drone Man did this evening. Thank you, Dan. And you can have access to that. You can join us. We're going to also have a little Zoom connection to it. So you're going to be able to come on the show and talk to us about it with your experiences, and even ask questions of Graham, especially on that side of things as well. There is a link to Graham's awesome company, EyeUp Aerial Solutions. There you go. I actually remembered the name of it. In the description below, where you can find his consultancy services in terms of gaining your operational authorization to help you with things like ops manuals and that type of thing. We'll be talking about that more during the members stream as well. So that link is there. Do go and gain access to his wonderful experience and knowledge. But that will be.
Can I just jump in and say,
No.
If you do nothing else on that site, just go into the blog, and this is for open category as well, because there's stuff in there. Obviously, blogs do go out of date, and I do try and keep them updated, but it's not possible always. But I try and write stuff in an entertaining style. You can be the judge of it, but just go into the blog and read the blogs. There's a lot there.
Yes, entertaining, and again, thank you very much to the people who have joined the channel this evening: Dan the Drone Man, Joe Phillips, and Johnny Doe. I really do appreciate it. That you've joined at various different levels, but I really appreciate each and every single one of our supporters. We do have some interesting things, like actually Mark Wharry's talk, keynote speech at DroneX is also available to channel members, which you can join that section for the video stuff from just £1 a month. Sorry to be a salesperson, but I have to do it sometimes. There is a link in the description to become a channel member, or there's also a join button somewhere down there as well. But there we have it. That's the show for this evening. Graham, thank you so much for taking the time to put this together, and for debating this. I think it's clear to us what needs to happen, and I think that we hope this regulatory review process and the changes that must put the CAA through will result in the positive changes that we're looking for. We remain ready to be skeptical, but also to analyze those changes as well.
Well, and there's 2 points there. Presumably there will be changes, but how are those changes going to be communicated? How will we understand them? How will we get to understand them? Because this is another set of changes, guys. People need to be able to get their heads around it in advance of it hitting them.
Yeah,
they need to know, because they need to plan. They need to plan investment. They spend money based on this stuff. Really important.
Yeah, and they're spending money based on it over several years. They are growing businesses. So funnily enough, I don't want to harp over all things we've already said, but someone that's had 4 or 5 operational authorizations in a row, that has a large successful business based on this, providing client services, if they suddenly start to get out of context holds and information they just don't understand, and it starts to become too much of a hurdle, they're going to take other steps. They're going to do other things, etc. They're not going to continue investing, and that to me is a worry in terms of growing. Because yes, we've got all this future flight stuff, which is all very, very exciting. Government puts a lot of money into it. It's a very, very exciting future. I look forward to it happening, should it happen. However, what we do have already at the moment is a thriving and passionate drone sector here in the UK, and that needs protecting.
Absolutely. It is, as you say, future flight is future flight. We none of us live in the future, not yet. We will.
Oh, I do.
But we're not there yet, guys.
I'm actually bringing this. This is a real dad joke, isn't it? I'm actually bringing this live stream from 2030. But there we go. I tried to back out of that. I had to complete it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. We've got a video already edited, which is releasing tomorrow evening. I'm also live tomorrow evening again as well. So you really are going to be sick and tired of me very soon. But thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate the high audience numbers for what is not necessarily the most interesting conversation in the world, but it's an important one, which I think the numbers have shown that as well, that people do see it as important. But we'll see you next time on Geeksvana Live. Thanks, everyone.
Lovely. Cheers.